Thank you very much for being with us this evening. So this is number 3, and it did indeed follow on from High Hopes. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
But there's one significant change, I don't know if you could call it a change, which is that you set up your own production company for Life is Sweet. And I wondered if you could just sketch in the imperative behind that and Simon Channing-Williams.
Simon Channing-Williams was an amazing guy, an amazing producer. I met him in 1980 when we made that film for the BBC, Grown Ups. There was a first assistant director. I'll only take 25 minutes to tell this story. There was a first assistant director who, on the first meeting, we went for a drink in the BBC bar, and she told me what to do and how to do it, and what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And so she got fired the next day. And then another guy came along who was really good, and we went down to Canterbury and we started to rehearse the film. And this guy suddenly said he'd been offered a gig to direct something, so he was not available. So another guy came along and he got ill, and we were getting very close to the filming. And then they said, oh, there's a chap coming down on Friday, he's called Simon Channing-Williams. I thought, oh, fuck, some tough. And, this guy, you know. Simon Channing-Williams, you knew him, didn't you? He was enormous. He was... don't misunderstand that as just fat, but he was just a big man, generous, incredible organiser. On that occasion, at lunchtime, we'd been in Canterbury rehearsing this film for some weeks, and every Friday night we used to go to a restaurant, and there was only a smallish cast, and I went back to the rehearsal in the afternoon, and I said, oh, I met this guy, he seems very nice, and everyone said, well, why don't we invite him to join us it'll be very nice. And the word came back that he'd actually organised something else. So we got a little bit pissed off, really. We thought, he's only just arrived, and we thought we knew all, by this time thought we knew all the venues and eating houses such as there were in Canterbury. And he said, oh, we're going to a pub, and we all thought, a pub? And we go to this pub, and we go in, and everyone's going, we were going to have dinner. And and I'd said to him, do you know Canterbury? Have you ever been here before? He said, no, I don't really know it. And we went into the pub, and the landlord said, hello, Simon. I thought, that's very strange. He's never been here before. And then we were having a drink, which Simon magnanimously arranged. And the guy came in and said, okay, it's ready for you now, Simon. And we went through behind a discreet curtain, and there was this extraordinary restaurant that no one had ever heard of. I tell you all that because it's a measure of how extraordinary, what a great organiser and a genius he was. And I mean, he could make things happen that nobody else could, all sorts of stuff to make it all work. And so we worked together on a few things, and eventually we decided that we should, because by this time Channel 4, of course, had started. This is some years later, and the whole point about Channel 4 is that it enabled independent productions. So we'd done High Hopes, which we made for another company, and we decided, to hell with this, let's form our own company.
What's the advantage of it, Mike, for somebody like you?
Well, you're just in control of everything, and why not? And everybody was, It was the company which still exists was called Thin Man Films. Simon, as I say, was pretty rotund, and I always got a bit of a belly on it myself. And we went to actually to the Groucho Club, and we sat down and he said, "Okay, what are we going to call this company?" And for a joke, I said, "Well, let's call it Thin Man Films." And a couple of days later, he said, "Okay, I've registered with the Board of Trade." That's what it's called. And I spent a lifetime saying, "No, it's got nothing to do with those famous Thin Man films." You know. He was a fantastic producer. He could make everything happen. The great thing about him was that, and this is a measure of what is a good producer, he was an enabler, but he never affected to interfere with the formal content of the, he was just there to enable me and everyone to do it and to make it happen. Also brilliant at raising money for some impossible projects, including Topsy Turvy. But he got cancer and he died some 9 years ago, very sadly. But Georgina Lowe, who worked with us for many years, is now the producer, and the company still exists. And we're struggling, as ever, to make another film.
And the problem is always the same, which is there's no script. So any people put out the money.
You go to the backers and you say, "Can't tell you anything about it, there's no script, won't discuss casting, we don't want to be interfered with, give us the money and we'll make a film." And it's very straightforward. Only one of two things happen. Either they say, "Fantastic, great, go for it," or they tell us to fuck off. and mostly the latter has happened. Yeah, that's...
But, good, but on this particular one, somehow or the other, the money came through, probably on the back of High Hopes did okay.
It did. And there's always Channel 4, Film 4 as it now is called, has always and continues even to this day to be a number one enabler. Actually, when this film was made and those earlier films, you didn't need more than a couple of... There was Film 4, Channel 4, and what was it called? Before the Film Council, it was called something else. I can't remember what it was called, but it was the as it were, state-funded film outfit, and you could really get it together with no more than those two, and so this happened. There was no hassle with this. Let's talk about the film.
I'm going to, yeah. In place, as far as I understand it, when you started off, you gather your actors essentially, and you gathered Jim Broadbent, Alison Stebbins, to whom you were married at the time, but that's neither here nor there, and I guess Tim Spall.
Yes, and also the other. I mean, I always start with everybody. I cast everybody. There's always a bit of one or two very minor characters might be brought in later, but no. Everybody that plays anything like was there in the mix to start.
I made the distinction with Claire and Jane because there's no script, so you don't necessarily know there's going to be sisters. No,
you do. I mean, I did. In this, we're talking about this film. Yes. Yeah, I mean, the idea was a family. Actually, in the auditions when I met Jane Horrocks, who I'd actually met previously, in fact, and Claire Skinner, I thought they look similar enough to be sisters. And we embarked on it. It wasn't when we'd started to develop these characters, having of course first of all developed the parents, and it just had suddenly dawned on me one day that they could actually be twins. So we explored that, and because what's great about that is that they could be twins, they could look like twins, but at the same time you could explore the difference between them.
Yeah. And there's that nice line about being non-identical.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you went into it...
Well, I usually do in some shape or form. It varies.
Sure.
It depends on the film, but usually I would say these films which have family structures, generally speaking, I mean, that's a decision, however putative and however rough it is, the part of the built into the assumptions of the casting. I mean, I didn't know what we were going to do with Spall. I certainly didn't know we were going to do what we did. And part of it, as you may know, is that the jumping off point is, I work with each actor individually and get them to talk about all sorts of people they know. And Tim Spall came up with this guy that that had been hanging around a film in some capacity. I don't quite know, not an actor. I can't really remember, but this guy seemed completely implausible and over the top, which is what you could say about his character in the film.
Yeah.
But there are such nutters around.
Yes, at a time of, I was looking up the history to reaffirm it. I mean, Thatcher was still, as it were, on the throne while you were making this. She got defenestrated by the Tories just after it played. I guess at the.
Well, you can date this by the fact that they have a T-shirt saying "bollocks to the poll tax."
Yes, yeah, which was the cause of her demise. So this is a very family film. It's kind of, let's go back to Bleak Moments briefly in the series. It's the two sisters, no parents about, it's the two sisters. With Bleak Moments, their brother, sister, mother.
High Hopes, you mean?
Oh, High Hopes, sorry. And they're kind of scattered. Mrs. Bender lives on her own. Val and Martin are married. Shirley and Cyril are living together. And now here, we're very nuclear and we're living together. And that's something that was in your mind.
Well, that's what it's about, yeah.
Pretty early on. Yeah. About the tensions within.
Yeah, that's there to explore, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and they're quite a loving couple. Wendy and Andy.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing. I mean, by the time we made this, I mean, I and Alison Steadman had our kids for one of them for over a decade and one of them just under a decade. So, one was fully aware of the exigencies of parenting. Of course, the other thing about this film, as you may have spotted, it is about food. And so I did have this notion that food should inform the whole thing, really.
Although it's interesting, good old structure, I'm interested in that. You pace it. We don't find out what Andy does until I timed it. It's about 40 minutes in.
Well, that's a deliberate gag, really. Course, I mean, you think, this guy is obviously a wanker. There's no way he he gets this character. There's no way he's going to be able to cook a burger. And then you discover that actually he runs a professional kitchen, I think it works, It
does. It's great. And it's juxtaposed. It's the moment when we find out that Nicola has got a hoard of chocolate in the case underneath her bed. And I think it's brilliantly structured.
Good.
I wanted to talk about this thing.
You've got a laugh there. I'm not quite sure why.
I know. I'm trying to ignore it because I want to be so serious. But thank you for the laugh. I want to talk about this document that comes along, which is the skeleton. I don't know what to call it.
I call it a shooting script.
Very good. Could you explain about it?
Sure. I mean, we there isn't a script in the conventional sense, we know. And I'll preface, I mean, you obviously want to talk about these technicalities. I'll preface the precise answer to that by just reminding anyone that doesn't know that the work that goes on for the several months before we get to the shoot is about creating the characters and relationships, the backstories, the research that needs to go on to fit, make it all real and plausible and grounded and so on. But we don't going to come up with a script. We're not rehearsing we're establishing the premise of the thing. When it comes to the shoot, scene by scene, sequence by sequence, location by location, we will work without the crew around to improvise, which is what we've been doing in the main preceding period, and through rehearsal, script precisely. In other words, rehearse and pin it down and say, no, actually you say that and let's swap that round and improvise that, hold that, say that again, blah, blah. And that's how we finally arrive at a very precise, structured action. But of course you can't do that without having there being some sense of structure of the film. And indeed you can't, because anyone here who's involved in film knows you can't organise a film without some information to go on to organise it, So I write as late as possible, very late in the day, before we start shooting. I write what we call, for want of a better name, a shooting script. Scene 1, day, interior, bedroom, X in bed. Scene 2, day 1, Monday first week or whatever, depends on the film. Scene 2, X, walking down the street, same day, blah, blah. Scene 3, X walks in the office. So that's the amount of information that's in it. That information is important because it means we can sit down and work out a shooting schedule and decide when we're going to be at this location or that location. But the actors will know some things that relate to things that they know about, and not others. So it's a blueprint that works from different points of view. And for me, it's the actual structure to work from. It's only a premise. It gets deviated from hugely, as you know, and invariably it will reach a point where it'll go scene 49, 50, 51, etc., etc. We do not know how this is going to end, so stay tuned, because invariably with most of the films, we arrive. Because in the end, it's about exploring, it's about making the film up as you go along. And all the stuff that happens before we start to shoot is by way of making that possible. So you're not sitting around wondering who these people are. You're merely sorting out what happens to them, basically.
Yeah, I think I was fascinated when I first saw one of these, because it's easy to mistake it for the structure of the film. If you don't know.
Well, it is the structure of the film.
Well, it is.
Let's be clear. I mean, this is very important. Applies to any film that anyone's going to make, and I say it to students. There has to be, in some shape, a film in your head. However amorphous or fluid or precise that may happen to be. So, I mean, I couldn't, I mean, the idea, I always say, we don't know what it is and we're going to just see what happens and that's true on one level, but it can't be completely true, otherwise you wouldn't have any idea what to do, basically. So, but the point about the film in your head, with this organic kind of filmmaking, and this applies, as I would have said before, it's the equivalent to all work, whether you're painting or writing novels or plays or poetry or making music or sculpture or whatever you do. It's an evolving journey. And the film or the sculpture or the painting or the novel in your head moves on and defines itself as a result of what happens, basically, and the ongoing exploration. And
but I suppose
clairvoyant flashes,
Yeah, I suppose it's the point I was going to make was that actually, of course, there's yet more stages and the big stage that keeps this earlier stage of the shooting scripts kind of molten is that you're going to edit, and that's yet another.
That's true.
Refinement.
Although, to be honest, although I like any other filmmaker, I never made a film where we didn't change things and swap things around and do all that. Nevertheless, with my films, whilst that's true, because that is the whole advantage of editing, it doesn't happen to such a substantial degree that it's a complete reinvestigation. But on the whole, what you see in the end product is, broadly speaking, what we filmed, basically. It's not really as open-ended as one might think in that respect.
Right. In which case, can one say that by the time you get to the shooting script, when you've produced the shooting script, with all your caveats taken on board, the story is in place.
The potential story is.
Yeah.
And, some of what you see, once you get into the detail, I mean, let's just talk about this film. I mean, I talk about the preparatory rehearsal period where we, here we worked in an old church hall in Stoke Newington, and we Stamford Hill, actually. By the way, across the road from the Catholic church where Hitchcock went as a kid. And if you see I Confess, that film with Montgomery Clift, you will see what is obviously this church, which is completely motivated and inspired by Hitchcock's memory of this church across the road from where we rehearsed this film. A detail. We always have different rooms, loads of furniture, tellies that work, so that we can really, improvisations aren't sort of, pretend things. They are, in real time and the real explorations. So there are lots of scenes of conflict and all the stuff with the girls and the family and all the rest of it. But nowhere, at no stage, were any of the actual events that are actually, for example, there are scenes between the two girls, one where they're sitting downstairs talking, one where they're in their two rooms, all that's going on. I mean, that is a precise that's a final, definitive, precise exploration of something, a distillation, if you like, that was suggested by all sorts of earlier things. But that becomes, and the point about that is that cinematic, because we're actually talking about looking at it, distilling it, making it precise, shots, design, or language, all the things which you arrive at, but it's very precise. So it's a combination of the principle of things having been established, but then it moves on. And as I say, invariably, with these films, not including the historical ones particularly, we really don't know how they're going to end. You discover it. I think, I can't guarantee this because we made this in 1990 and it's now a bit of time's gone
later,
by.
Yeah.
I think that I'm pretty sure actually that the notion of him falling over, tripping up at work was my idea, my intervention, dramatic intervention. But it's terribly important, obviously. And as to what goes on in the Regret Rien, well, that obviously came out of investigation and exploration and improvisation. One night, when we were developing it, Mr. Spall and I sat down and we said, right, let's invent the most outrageous things that will be on this menu. And so we made this very long list, and I said, okay, fine, but it's obviously errs in many of these examples on the silly. So we got a professional cook, professional food expert who does films, and we got her to cook, or try and cook, everything that was on this list. And of course, she came back with a very clear list saying, these are feasible, those are unfeasible. And the unfeasible ones aren't in the film. So all the ones you see, ridiculous though they seem, are totally gastronomically feasible.
Yes, we ought to be offering you them as a little snack.
Clams in ham, very nice.
Was it your intervention that people fall over? Because one of the things I noticed in watching it again was that Patsy falls over, she falls off as well as falling over in the cafe. I wondered whether it was any kind of motif that actually these men all fall.
No, it would be wrong to say that I had this idea that I'm making a film where people fall over. No, it was organic, but then, that they all fall over for a reason.
Different reason,
One falls over a spoon, one's drunk, and the other one's mad.
I watched it and thought, gosh, that can't be an accident. But and Stephen Ray also was on. You didn't know what he was going to be doing.
No, I mean, on the several occasions I worked with Stephen Ray, except apart from the play Ecstasy, which he was in, his part was never as big as I would have otherwise liked, because he was always busy doing something else. He could only give us a certain amount of time. Yeah. But he quits himself.
Yeah, he's fabulous. One of the things that is interesting for me about the family structures, especially in this film, is that they break down very well into twos. There are lots of scenes there are lots of pairs. So there's Wendy and Andy in bed with their conversations there. They're the two sisters. And pivotally, there's Nicola and her boyfriend who makes these fabulous interventions, Thewlis, of course, and he was part of the plan as well, even though you wouldn't have known how you were going to use him when it started.
No, and actually the thing about David Thewlis as a boyfriend is that I'd already worked with him before, and he's a brilliant actor, and I would have, if you'd, my assumption would have been that you would see more of him than you did, but because we explored that whole relationship, and I had this notion that I did have the notion that he would show up somewhere at the end, because he was in the habit, the guy, of just sort of loping around there, and of course suddenly at the end they're all at home when they wouldn't be expected to be, because there's been this accident, and that was my notion. And in fact we'd shot the scenes he was in, and then I just realised that would be a dramatic red herring. It would interfere with the natural conclusion of the film. And so he only wound up with two scenes. Incidentally, he was pretty good and cool about it, and it was fine. But he was disappointed, obviously. And so subsequently, I had a conversation, had a drink with him, and I said, would you like to do another film? He said, well, the thing is, how do I know that won't happen again? So I said, well, I'll tell you what, I guarantee you'll get a fair slice of the pie. And if you've seen Naked, you will know that I fulfilled my obligations.
Yeah.
But we'll come to that another time.
In due course.
But
we were talking about the twos.
Yes, I mean, I don't have much to say about that because it just is just the way it works out. It's an actual thing.
The other interesting structural thing for me was that, and this is something completely fundamental to your storytelling, is that there's a world of at home and there's a world of work, and it's very pronounced in this film with Wendy at Bunnykins and with the kids, and then helping out the regretful Anne, and you don't know what Andy does. You think he's a layabout of some kind, and then you discover he's doing this. And Natalie has got a proper job, and she's a pioneering plumber. And Nicola can do all the things she does with her lover because she's not working. She's at home. the world of work is a very important
It is.
thing for you, including the absence of it in meantime. It's a very clear thing.
Yes. I mean, again, I mean, I don't know quite what to say. I mean, my natural preoccupations are with how we are and what we do and how we do it and what life is about and reality. And looking at people at work and the experience of work and how it informs us is important. I can't say anything more profound than that isn't implicit in the film.
Yeah, it does give you, I mean, just from a purely musical point of view, you see, it's the way I look at things.
Yeah.
It gives you, the twos give you chamber things before you go back to a big ensemble. And the work and home contrast is, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's like a concerto principle where you've got this is going on there and this is going on there. It seems to be it's more than just thematic, and to me, it feels very structural and part of the poetry of what you do.
Yes, I understand that you are wanting for the matter of structure to be part of this ongoing...
Because it's going to be recorded.
I understand
students
that.
Are going to look
but I don't really... I mean, everything has a structure. I mean, a painting has a structure, a poem, obviously. And I don't really want to pontificate on matters of...
I suppose what interests me is that these are peculiarly yours,
Well,
I think.
but that's in the nature of...
The fact that they're your films.
Yeah, I mean, that's in the nature of things, really. Yeah.
Okay, I've had enough of this torture.
Do you want to say something about Rachel Portman's score?
I do. Funnily enough, I'm going to be talking to Rachel at the end of this month, interviewing her for something else. And I was very surprised to discover that she had written the song that the kids are dancing to at the beginning of the...
Well, yeah, she did, because we obviously had used some basic thing just to shoot it. And every song that was appropriate would have cost us a bloody fortune in copyright. So she said, OK, leave it to me. And she actually came back with this song, which she wanted to contrive to get the lyrics. And
it's fabulous, because anybody who knows Rachel Portman's work, it's the last thing you would expect of her.
Well, I mean, even judging from her score for this, which is delightful.
Yes, charming, and but it is much more in line with the work that one knows of her. She does good comedy.
The other thing about this film, which I think is very important, it's the kind of thing we haven't been talking about, is that this is the first film that I made that was shot by Dick Pope, the cinematographer, who has since shot everything I've done since, literally everything, including shorts and everything else. And I was working with Roger Pratt, but who suddenly became unavailable because he went off to make all those great films with Terry Gilliam. It was The Fisher King was the one that robbed us of him for this film. And somebody said, you should meet this guy Dick Pope. He's a documentary maker, but he's done one feature film, and you might find him interesting. And we just clicked, and as I say, he's shot everything I've done.
But it's interesting about the family, because as I was looking at the credits go by for this, I was thinking, well, these are people who you worked with, Christine Rundell for makeup, and Lindy Hemming for costume. I mean, Heather Storr.
I mean, it is great. I mean, I know some directors like to get different people every time, and but for me, it's very. It's not just a question of being comfortable. It's you grow as artists, and we push us. Dick Pope and I have gone on over all the films to push each other, and to challenge ourselves.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, and I was to me this is of course it's all hindsight, but this feels like the end of a particular group of films, because the next film is...
I think that's right. It's
such a complete contrast.
Yeah, deliberately. I mean, because we'll no doubt talk
there,
about that. But yeah, that's right. I think you're right, actually.
Naked is next, but not in this series, because I wanted to programme what I quite arbitrarily call the family films. together. So we'll next be looking at Secrets and Lies, which is quite a family film. A film about family, not
yes,
please.
hardly what you could call a family film.
Yes, not in the Disney sense, with huge respect. Okay, so over to you, Tim. Do you have questions? Yes, there's a gentleman there.
Thank you very much for your wonderful film. How does the camera come into the organic developing of the scenes? I can imagine it's an acting for theatre to develop the scenes between the individual actors and the dialogues. But how does the camera, which after all in film is crucial, how does that come into? Did you shoot the scenes as you were trying them and then sit down with your actors and look at them again, or does the camera do its own thing?
No, not at all. I mean, to answer your question, as you will see, if you look at any of the films, including this one, that they're not shot in a kind of loose quasi-documentary or improvisation sort of way. They're formally shot with proper shots. So the job is, I already said earlier that a little while ago, that what we arrive at through rehearsal in the location is something very precise. Then the crew, the cinematographer, will join us and I'll show him the scene. Sometimes I may say, because of the way I've structured it and what there is to look at, I may say, I think it's this. And he may say, absolutely, yeah, I can see that, definitely. Let's light it, let's do it. Sometimes I might say, I think it's this. And he might say, well, maybe, but I was over there and the light or some other thing. In which case we'll discuss it. And we always work with the actors. The actors are available to run bits for us while we work out how we're going to shoot it, how we work out the proper schedule of what we're going to shoot and the order in which we're going to shoot it. And it's got a real discipline to it. And in that sense, I think it is basically classic film language. It's not classic film language in that we shoot it like old-fashioned movies, where everything was shot with an establishing shot, a wide shot, long shots, medium shots, and close-ups. There are long shots, there are medium shots, and there are close-ups, but we don't follow that rigid, old-fashioned discipline. It depends, it's what shots mean and what possibilities they will give you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just asked a little supplementary. I mean, there's no such thing in a Mike Leigh film as talking about that conventional vocabulary. There's no master shot or anything.
Well, no. I mean, sometimes there isn't. No, there isn't. I mean, if there's a wide shot and then you go in on things, that's because that's what that is. But it's not a master shot in the old-fashioned sense, which was the convention. That the master shot was there, and it really was regarded as just that, a master shot that you could go back to. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Can I just say something about what we've just been talking about? I think one of the things that I feel worth sharing is this, that a lot of the focus of talking about my films is always about the actors, the characters, and in this case the structure and all of that. But for me, the gas of it all is absolutely all those things, but also of filmmaking, of cinematics, of sound, of place, and the look of not just how characters are, but the look of place, the details of artifacts and all those things. They're all part of the, I trained as an actor and I did the foundation course at the Camberwell Art School and I did the theatre design course, or part of it, at the Central School of Art. And I went to the London Film School because all of these things are part of the whole. So I think I only want to say that because, and I'm glad you asked the question about the cinematics, the look of the shooting of it, because that is as integral. I mean, there are films and there are filmmakers who are not, it is about letting things happen and letting the thing be fluid and organic in that sense. Found and accidental and stuff. Well, of course, the element of found and accidental is very much there because we arrive at things by improvising and exploring. But the important thing is to distill it in an organic way to something that is organised and disciplined.
Very good.
Hi.
Oh, yes, go
Over
ahead.
here.
Hello, I can see you now. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for the film. It occurred to me as I was watching that in many of your films, there's this fine balance between things that are believable daily on the one hand, and on the other hand, things that are totally absurd and elevated and silly. And I'm wondering if, as you're crafting the characters in the story with the actors, how you maintain that balance, if there's any motto to yourself that you speak as you're crafting the story and the characters that maintains that elevated silliness, wonderfulness that really brings us in, but also with the underbed of naturalism and believability that lets us relate.
First of all, just before answering the question, I would just say that as far as I'm concerned, my films are not naturalistic. They're not exercising naturalism, but realism. Naturalism's about the surface qualities of life. Realism gets to the essence of things. No is the answer to your question. There isn't. I don't sort of. It's not a conscious, mechanical thing. But obviously, my choices are motivated by what I think is interesting or comic or tragic or in good taste or whatever it may be. But it's organic. It's instinctive rather than objective or intellectual. I mean, obviously, short of saying, everything on this list of recipes, we should reject anything that's implausible and get a cookery expert to tell us. That's one thing. That was a definite decision to draw the line. But you see, the real answer to your question, I think, is this. Life is comic and tragic. That's how it comes out of the sea. But life is ridiculous and profound. And that's what I try and make happen, or let happen, if you like, in these films. I mean, obviously, there are times when one knows that you're pushing it. I mean, there's no question that Aubrey and the Le Regret Rien is pretty over the top. And I think, to be honest with you, you said my films. I think that element in this film is probably uniquely ridiculous compared with anything else in any of my films, to be honest with you. But even then, you have to say, is this? If I'd ever thought for a split second that an Aubrey or a Regret Rien was completely unfeasible, then we wouldn't do it, basically. I mean, there are these nutters around with schemes. In fact, there are more bonkers restaurants now than there were in 1990 when we made the film. Just to answer your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. You mentioned earlier actors, story and place, and we've had 3 films now with a very strong sense of place, and I wondered if you wanted to tell us more about the role of place in your storytelling.
Well, yeah, I mean, whether we're in a home or a street or a place of work or looking at in this case, a caravan that's converted into a snack bar. It's about what I was talking about, and what it's about is the buzz, an enjoyment, a fascination, a love of, feelings about, and abhorrence about too sometimes, about, places and architecture and artifacts and environment, and how that relates to how we are and how we behave, and all those things are integral. And in other words, I mean, there are films, quite legitimately, where there's no real there's no particular interest on the part of the filmmaker in the actual quality or nature of the environment or the artifacts. They're just there because they're the locations or they're the sets or whatever it is. And that is true, obviously, from an ordinary narrative point of view with this film and with my films. But I am really concerned, as I think in its own right, with the quality of and the idiosyncrasies and the nature and an exploration of places and environments. I mean, when we started to shoot this film on day one, it was the first time that Dick Pope and I were starting to find a shot. What we didn't know is that we were going to develop a profound relationship that was going to go on for decades. It was day one, and we hadn't done it. We talked about the film, and we knew what we were basically. But so there we were in Enfield, in a very, on the face of it, rather dull environment with council houses in Enfield, North London, and everyone was very patiently waiting while we sorted out what the shot was, and we walked down the street and we looked at this, and Dick said, well, it's not interesting, and it's not, because we ought to see more. And I said, no, but that's not relevant. We were finding our language. And in the end, the shot that we wound up with is just looking at the house straight. And Dick said, well, this is not very interesting. I said, I think it's very interesting, because that's what it's about. And in fact, there are quite a lot of shots of people's homes straight in my, because actually what was motivating me, apart from saying this is where they live and she comes home and those things, is also saying was also in an implicit way, and this is a direct answer to your question, a celebration of this little house, an enjoyment of the dynamics, or if you like, the simplicity of this house. And that is not merely saying, well, let's find a way of sexing up this. Actually, it's saying, let's celebrate, let's share, let's have feelings about the quality of this environment. I think that's probably an answer to your question. I hope so.
It ties in with, if I can say, with a general approach, which is about particularity. Every character, there's no minor character really. Somebody may have a small role, but they're given their due weight.
Yes, I mean, Aubrey's assistant.
It's fabulous. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Paula.
Great performance.
Fabulous. But exactly that. That's the point, really. There's a particularity about them. The place is, I think, the same.
Yeah. It's a synthesis of people and places and also other things, the sound of things. I think the point is made.
Hello. I was just wondering how you felt about marriage. When I was watching this, I kept on thinking about Another Year, and the way that the dynamic between the couples as they relate to sort of individuals outside the relationship, and the sort of the bordering judgment that almost brings them closer together, whether that's a sort of whether it's a critique, because I thought they shared that, or whether it's a sort of celebration of that intimacy. But they do seem to sort of sit on a boundary. Or at least that was my interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I would not want to generalize. I may misunderstand you in some way, but it vaguely sounds as though, because you began by saying, I wonder what you think about marriage. Well, that's a big question. Apart from anything else, Alice and Stedman and I, who still have a very good relationship, were married when we made this film, but we've long since been divorced. So there's that to be said. I don't really know what the general point is to be made about this. I mean, there is, it's obviously the case that there are across my films a whole bunch of explorations of marital or quasi-marital relationships, some more successful than others, and it's just an ongoing investigation, really. I don't know what else to say about that, really.
What I really mean is that it seems to be that the marriages sit centrally and then there are these characters orbiting them. And I'm sort of wondering, in terms of a dramatic construct or even a critical construct, what the sort of fascination with marriage is as it relates to these sort of eccentric characters, if at all.
Yes, I mean, the problem with your question, with some questions that one gets on these occasions, is that it's hard to extrapolate a generalisation about it. But it's true that looking at the dynamic of a relationship in relation to somebody else who is drawing something or contributing something to or taking from something from that relationship, but who are ultimately outside of it, is what we're looking at. I don't know what to say, really. It's a difficult one. Sorry.
I'm just trying to think if I can help you out. I mean, one of the things we're looking at in this first group is a family theme. And insofar as families occur a lot, not exclusively, there are films without them, I suppose marriages or quasi-marriage is an inevitable part.
Yeah,
of
but
that.
but the question, what you're talking about, isn't marriage itself. Is what you're looking at, as I understand it, is the character who is the person who is not one of the two people in the marital or quasi-marital relationship, but is outside it, and is relating to
borrowing from it. Yeah, so it's the same with the Leslie Manville character. And
I mean,
and now I remember that being a big discourse around that film, was whether it was a sort of whether that couple, there was something sort of hostile in their relationship to her, which I think was probably overblown.
Yes, I think that's what you're talking about. All on another year. People have said that. I think it's twaddle, actually. I think they are totally sympathetic towards her, but when she behaves badly, they get pissed off with her, really. But we'll talk about that
when we get there. Yes, do come back. And somebody else has got the mic, I know. Yeah.
Yes, I wondered, given the timing of when this film was made and came out, it seems to be a lot about the working class in Britain at the time, in England maybe. Were you kind of very influenced by the politics of the era? Because it seems that it's saying something about the people who were, under Thatcher, trying to be entrepreneurial and obviously not doing very well at it, or I don't know, in some cases, who knows what might have happened with the caravan. But, it's that sort of seems to be a theme in the film.
Yes, I mean, I think that's right. I think it was, I mean, I think I can say, insofar as you kind of forget some things, but that certainly was part of what was on the go with this. But obviously, I mean, a number of my films, including not least this one, were criticised by some people on the far left as they put it, and it was said in different ways at different times, but it was certainly said about this film, that it was wasting an opportunity because it didn't really come out and say anything. It didn't man the barricades. It didn't come out and, and pontificate about right and wrong and workers and, all the rest of it. But it's all there, and it's all implicit in what the film is about. It is about surviving. It's about coping with stuff. It's about questioning. It's about, but it's not actually about. It doesn't come out and say. I mean, apart from the bollocks to the ball tax T-shirt, it doesn't actually, lay it on the line. But it's certainly the case. One of the interesting things, which is not obviously in any way manifest in the film, is that in the 9 or 10 months or something that I wasn't around the West End, because we were off either rehearsing or shooting this film, because we prepared it. We used to have an office till recently, which we lost in the pandemic, in Greek Street. We had it throughout this period. And then we edited, as we always do with these films, in Soho. But in that 9 or 10 months when I was off making the film, there was a massive change happened. Before I went off to make the film, you hardly saw any homeless people on the streets in Soho. 9, 10 months later, the streets were full of people on the street, So that's just a measure. I say that partly because it's, I think, anecdotally interesting, but also it's a measure of things that were going on at the time, and it's not necessarily manifest in the film, but everything that is in the film is definitely comes out of what frankly I would have to suggest is a social consciousness, really.
Apologies. This might be a bit of a non-question, but is there anything that you wish we would ask you about the film, or some aspect you think is overlooked in discussion about the film?
I think you're suggesting that the remote possibility that it may be a non-question could very well be very accurate, I think. No, I mean, is there anything that you wish that I'd been asked? I'm
going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is why I'm flicking through. Do you have an answer to that question, though?
No, I don't, but I'm glad you answered the question also.
Thank you.
I'm just going to, I think the technical term is wind up, with this quote from you.
Okay. It's all lies, you know that.
Yeah. You wrote this for the film's premiere at the London Film Festival. In alphabetical order and amongst other things, Life is Sweet is about accordions, affection, alcohol, alienation, anorexia, baby wear, ballet, baths, bird cages, birth, boys, bullshit, candles, capitalism, cars, caravans, caring, catering, central heating, chocolate, chips, coffee, cowboy hats, daughters, dieting, disco dancing, do-it-yourself, drums, dying, eatables, energy, enjoyment, Europe, existence, families, fatherhood, fatness, feelings, football, free enterprise, garlic, girls, goldfish, the goons, guitars, high hopes, holidays, industrial safety, jam, kids, kith, kin, laughter, lies, life, love, lust, Princess Margaret, marriage, money, motherhood, kneading, nibbling, nutrition, orthopedic beds, paranoia, parents, Paris, Piaf, pineapples, plaster dogs, plumbing, politics, prawns, quiche, rape, regrets, restaurants, roast lamb, scarves, second-hand goods, sex, spoons, stuffed dogs, sugar and spice, survival, taking risks, tea, tears, togetherness, tongues, tripe, twins, the USA, violence, warmth, whiskey, wine, World War II, X chromosomes, youth, zeal and zest.
I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much. See you again soon.
Very good.